Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
A story that happened to me. This happened when I was 15 years old. I'm at my friend's house. It was at night and we were playing on his Xbox. My friend had two dogs, a Chihuahua and a Labrador. At that time, the two dogs were with us, lying in a corner of the room. His older sister was house sitting, as their parents were out at an event. We stopped playing and went out to buy snacks. There is a store near her house, but it was closed and we had to walk about 30 minutes to get to a 7-Eleven to shop. On the way to the 7-Eleven, I felt watched, or rather like there was someone near me. My friend commented that we should hurry, but didn't tell me why. We shopped and started walking back to the house. It was about 11:30 at night and the stretch we walked was very dark. As we walked back, that feeling of having someone close to me didn't go away and I told my friend. I thought he was going to mock or ignore my comment, but I could see in his face that he was worried too. He told me that strange things happen near this street. According to what he has heard from his sister and other friends, it is common to hear voices and whistles, but when you try to find where those sounds come from, you will realize that you are all alone. I was already freaked out, but the worst came next. We were a couple of blocks away from his house, and we started to hear something from behind. It was movement, but it wasn't footsteps. I turned to look and I could see a dog. It was big and brown-haired. I stayed watching for a moment and my friend stopped to look too. The dog stared at us and after a few seconds it started to come closer. When the dog started walking towards us, I heard it. The dog said,
"Wait for me, I'm coming with you."
My friend yelled and ran away. I followed him as fast as I could. From behind I could hear the dog chasing us and the thing started laughing. It was a human laugh, low and maniacal. We ran all the way to his house and thank God, my friend's dogs were in his yard waiting for us. The dog that was chasing us was still laughing, and when my friend opened the gate to his house, his Labrador shot out into the street. I still remember, when the Labrador came out to defend us, that monster or whatever fought him off, but my friend's dog didn't last long. I was closing the gate and I got to see what happened. My friend was screaming for his sister to help us. That monster dog killed the Labrador. He was biting it by the neck, and all of a sudden he let go. He started laughing again. The dog stood up on two legs and grabbed the Labrador's body and carried it away towards some bushes that led to a nearby hill. All this happened in less than 2 minutes. I was in shock and my friend had to push me into his house. It took us a few hours to recover. His sister was trying to calm us down and the Chihuahua was shaking as he watched the door. His parents arrived around 1 a.m. They were scared and asked us what happened. My friend explained and his parents seemed surprised, but didn't question the story. His mom told us to start praying and his dad was locking doors and windows. We were praying when all of a sudden we started hearing the same dog laughing and it sounded like scratching at the windows. His dad started yelling at him and cursing at the thing to go away. It was only about 5 minutes and suddenly the laughter stopped and he didn't hear anything else. After all this, you could say that everything went back to normal. His parents told us to go to sleep and that the next day we would go for help. Well, what happened next may not be familiar to many of you as this has a lot to do with the legends and superstitions of Mexico, which is where I live. When we woke up, his parents asked us to describe better what happened. I had already overcome the shock of the experience and I started to tell them everything that happened and the things I felt when we went shopping. They told me that what we saw was probably a Nahual. For those who do not know, a Nahual is a witch or shaman that has the ability to change its shape to that of an animal after making a pact with evil forces. Maybe you can say that they are similar to skinwalkers. I already knew what they were, but I never thought I would run into one. They told us that they had called a friend to do a cleanse for us, to remove any kind of negative energy or curses that the Nahual had put on us. According to them, if we had not prayed at night, the Nahual would have probably done some harm to us or even kidnapped us. The day passed and the lady who was a friend of my friend's parents did a cleansing for us. She also cleansed the house and put some things to protect it. Those talismans, if you can call them that, were buried around the house and she gave us some necklaces to protect us. Those were the events that happened at the time, but over the years my friend and his sister, who are the ones who have told me a couple of their experiences, say that the activity has not completely ended. The worst case of strange activity was when one night they heard their Chihuahua barking. When they went to check what was going on, they heard scratching at the door and whining. They didn't open the door, but they looked out the window and there they saw it. It was a Labrador dog. He was scratching the door and had his head down. His sister almost opened the door, but my friend stopped her and told her not to even think about opening it. It was sudden. The dog barked and turned to look at them. His eyes were yellow and he was bleeding from his neck. They looked at each other and the dog smiled at them and then went off into the bush. There are a few more stories, but they are only about scratching or barking near their house. His sister doesn't live there anymore and my friend says he is about to move. I just hope whatever is terrorizing them doesn't follow him to his new house.
Happened to me when I was about 10 years old in a small town in Scotland, playing football with a few other mates down the back alleyway behind my house one evening. If you're not familiar, in the UK there are a lot of old terraced houses, and instead of a back garden you have a small courtyard that backs onto an alleyway, about big enough to drive a car down. They're usually quiet and empty, so they were always great for playing out in. There was an older guy in his late 60s probably that lived alone a few doors down from me. Absolute bastard. He rarely left his house, and if you ever lost your ball over his back wall, he'd burst it. Local kids would spread rumors about him killing and eating pigeons. You could find the bones outside the back of his house. Mom always told me just to stay clear of him. He always gave off a really strange vibe. On this day, we're messing about on the street and one of my friends kicks the ball over his back wall. Great, now he's gonna destroy it if we don't get it back. Rock, paper, scissors, who's going to climb the wall to get it back? I lose, great. Scale over as quiet as possible. Pick related, it's similar to what the alley looked like but without the gates. I'm standing in his tiny courtyard, and I grab the ball. I look up and straight into his dining room window. He's dancing with what honestly looks like some mummified body, like Norma Bates, doing a waltz around the room with the lights off. The body is a woman's, it looks like, just emaciated, stiff and dark brown colored. As soon as he sees me, he runs to the window and pulls the curtains shut, screaming. I absolutely crapped myself, drop the ball, scramble over the fence as I hear him unlocking his back door. Friends just run and assume he's coming after us to shout at us or whatever. Too baffled and frightened to tell anybody about it, but still think about it every now and then. He ended up dying a few years later. The house was in absolute disrepair and really grown over with weeds. Never found anything else about the body or what the hell was going on there.
Me. 10-ish years old. Play a game of rock, paper, scissors. Tie every time. Stop counting after about 20. I just know the next move every time. Eventually I deliberately make the wrong move just to end the game. Try again. Can't do it. Later. 17 years old. Hi at a party. Tell friend I can read his mind. He looks annoyed like, yeah right you high dumbass. He asks me who I am thinking of. I laugh and tell him to think of another. You see, he is not actually a friend but a jackass, so I don't want to talk to him while he is giving off such negative energy. He does. I laugh again. He rolls his eyes and goes about his business. Next morning I FB message him the two names. He starts freaking out right away because I was right. Neither time I can explain it, I just knew, and I was certain that I knew, it wasn't a guess. Wife, story she told me. 18-ish. Is a gothy teenager. Has gothy friends. Most of them messed up, on drugs, Satanists, whatever. Mostly just edgy losers but nothing scary. One of these friends, yet another witch, is particularly weird. Talks about wanting to go on murder rampages. Dyes her hair the same as my wife. Dresses the same. Imitates her very blatantly. Wife is hanging out with people. She is completely sober, room is well lit. For a good long time she had the sense something is wrong. She internally says a prayer to God to show her what is wrong. Right beside her, her friend's face literally dissolves away into this demonic skull, and it stays that way. Wife runs away. Stops talking to that girl, convinced she is possessed. Stops being a goth. Long story short. That girl has been stalking my wife for the past 10 years. She has made a dozen different Facebook accounts to try to friend her and is blocked every time. She has been caught driving by her, walking by where she works. She pings my wife's website daily, which doesn't get much traffic, so it is very conspicuous. We moved away and hopefully she doesn't know where we live now.
Be me as a kid. On vacation with family. Staying in very old hotel that looks like the one from The Shining. Taking a bath. The bathroom is so old the bathtub has those lion feet holding it up like you see in old movies. See something in corner of my eye. Tall gray smoky figure of a person is standing right next to the bathtub watching me. It immediately just sort of blurs away. Leaves a weird smell. Tell myself I must be sick and hallucinating or sleep deprived. It felt like a dream, it was so strange. Go to bed. As I'm trying to fall asleep, I hear faint voices. Put the blanket over my head and pretend I'm just imagining things. Hear movement in the room. Take the blanket off my head and look. 3 of the same smoky figures are standing near the bed. As soon as I look at them, they just blur away, like when your eyes get foggy and you blink and it clears up. Again, I just tell myself I must have a fever or something. Go back to bed, but still hear faint voices throughout the night. At one point, I hear a very clear voice of a woman and she sounds frustrated. Said something like he's not. I still remember it really clearly. I think it was a genuine ghost experience.
Happened when me and my younger sister were in our early teens. 2 of us hanging out alone in the house. Suddenly hear faint ringtone. Mid-2000s, so ringtones all still had the signature shitty cell phone tone, not sure if it's called chiptunes or something else. Go into other room in the direction it's coming from. Sister not on phone. Now sounds like it's behind me. She hears it too. We go back, follow sound. It stops. All right, whatever, continue with day. Few minutes later it starts ringing again. We follow direction of the sound back to the room we first both heard it. By now realize it's a totally foreign tune to both of us. Meaning none of the phones in our family had that ringtone, nor had we heard it elsewhere. Stops. Move the couch, tear it apart, dig our little hands into all crevices. Starts up again within minutes. Now it's faintly playing in the garage. Go down there, it gets fainter, coming from back in the other room. Go back. Now it's definitely outside by the planter. Other end of the house, but it's summer, had at least one window open. Go outside. Sound stops. Look all along the backyard perimeter of the house where we could have heard it inside from. Nothing and no one. Starts again, clearly coming from back in the house. You get the picture. We looked in every room and behind, under everything we could find, but never found the source. Looking back recently, I almost thought maybe my sister had gotten a secret phone from her friends and was hiding it, but it continuously came from other places inside and outside of the house, leading us both on a wild goose chase whenever it started ringing. It was ethereal, just a sound in the air. This happened sporadically for a couple hours that afternoon, maybe 5 or 6 calls total. The tune was oddly emotional, like deeply bittersweet. We had an Adventures in Odyssey CD set at the time where a character named Lester was secretly living in someone's walls, so we joked that it was Lester's phone.
Be me 14-year-old. Me and friend decide to go to his grandmother's house in the woods for a weekend during winter. We decide to go out to barbecue in the woods, approximately 100 to 200 meters away from the house. Bring an air-compressed rifle to play pretend that we are hunters. A deep ditch with a small stream beside our campfire with a small hill on the other side. Running around and shooting on trees. Suddenly, footsteps in the snow coming from the other side of the hill. We freeze. A faceless, completely blacked out figure comes walking up the hill. Black figure stops, seems to look at us. We say hello. No response. Continue saying hello several times. Still no response. Figure starts to turn away and starts walking. Hear snow crackling under the figure's feet. Disappears behind the hill. Me and friend just stare at each other. Run up the hill to check where the figure went. Nothing there. Panic.exe. Run like the Flash. Later learn that there used to be a woodcutting factory further into the woods, where several men had lost their lives. Never told anyone what we saw. Non-native English speaker here, so sorry in advance. Absolute scariest encounter I've ever had was with what me and my friend assumed was a ghost.
Alright, X, I had an experience that I can't explain that I want to share. I'm not going to Greentext because I'm mobile, but I'll try to format in a way that isn't AIDS. So last night I was traveling down Ohio 309 heading west around 2 a.m. I was on an abandoned stretch of road between Amish country and civilization, just cruising listening to music. I'm crossing a dense patch of woods. I see a bright-ass headlight flying up behind me. No big deal, he'll pass me, or so I think. Instead, this light gets right up on my ass, to the point that it's blinding me. I can see the outline of a motorcycle behind this intense white light, and I think, okay, this guy just wants to be a prick. So I slow down. I was going 65 miles per hour and I dropped down to 40, but the bike stayed right on my ass the whole time. I roll down my window and wave him around me to pass. He doesn't. Instead, the bike keeps perfect pace with my car. I cannot stress to you, X, how bright this headlight is. It's completely blinding me, illuminating the entirety of my cab. I'm pissed now, so I tap my brakes again and pull over to confront this guy. I've got my Keltec PF9 on my hip, so I'm not intimidated at all, just pissed. I step out of the car, the light goes off, and the only sound I hear is my own engine. There's no bike, just an empty shoulder and some trees. No logic could explain what happened to the bike behind me. It pulled over with me. I didn't hear it, I didn't see it, the light went off and it was gone. I felt like I was being watched and I had a sudden sense of danger. I quickly got back in my car and began to drive again. Didn't see anything after. Not the scariest story, but it happened to me and I didn't know where else to post it. My wife believes I was just sleep deprived, but I was wide awake.
I just saw a Mothman. I'm posting from my car at home now, but here's the story. I was sitting down on a bench near a lake in the UK, Brecon Beacons, and it was around 9:30 p.m. The sky was quite dark, but not pitch black, and I decided to head back to my car and drive home. I was with my dog at the time, and he stopped walking alongside me and just stood there behind me acting kind of strange. I instantly felt a tension physically, but I kept going in the same direction because I had to get to my car, which was pretty far away, and it was getting pitch black outside. Around 10 seconds later, as I'm walking, I noticed that in front of me, I kid you not, is this massive creature with huge pink eyes sitting in a tree. They were glowing kind of like a cat's eyes, and it was shaped just like the stereotypical depiction of Mothman, but its features were obscured by the darkness. It was around 5 feet 9 in height, something like that. Man, I wish I took a photo, but I was in shock. It climbed the tree and then flew off before I could collect my thoughts. It was too dark to make out its features fully, but it had an albino color scheme, light gray. It couldn't have been an owl or a bat. It was abnormally huge and had long insect-like wings hanging down its sides. It moved very smoothly. It looked surreal, like a phantom. There is no way it was a bird or a bat. It was the same size as me, probably slightly bigger. And like I said, it didn't move like an animal either. Funnily enough, I recently started getting interested in cryptids again. Never would have thought I'd see something like this though, especially in the UK.
I've been reading so many theories about Bigfoot. To me, it's somewhat comical. I believe that certain people are allowed to witness these creatures, in particular those people who have traditionally lived among them. I'm not sure what other people are seeing. My family has lived in Jackson County, North Carolina for as long as anyone can remember. We are Cherokee. There are stories of Stone Man or hairy savages seen by our people historically throughout the Qualla boundary. I have a story told to me by my grandfather when I was a boy. Grandpa Parker talked about the large garden and cornfields his parents maintained. They would grow heirloom bean and tomato varieties that came from hundreds of years in Cherokee culture. They kept a few field animals, but at that time, they didn't raise livestock. After a while, his parents decided that they would try raising chickens. He helped his father build a large chicken house, and another small barn that would be used as a workshop. Everything went well, and after a few years, their flock of egg-laying hens were prospering. His father was also a very good handyman and fixed equipment for other farmers in the area. One day, just before the harvest season, Grandpa Parker and his father went hunting in the woods west of the farm. Their main quarry was squirrels that day. As they reached their regular spot along a ridge thick with hickory trees, his father looked worried. They rarely talked or made any noise while in the woods, but his father suddenly started to whistle in a long sustained tone. They sat quietly on the boulder for a few minutes, until his father once again let out a long whistle. "We need to move," his father abruptly said. They got up and started to briskly walk on the trail towards the farm. When they reached the end of the woods, they heard a loud whistle coming from the direction where they came. They cut through the cornfield and quickly reached the workshop. Grandpa Parker was becoming worried. His father didn't say anything, just directing him to stay with him. His mother was in the garden working, when his father shouted out to her to go to the house. They all met at the door by the kitchen and went inside. He and his father sat at the table while his mother cooked coffee. "Why did we leave the woods?" His father looked at him and asked if he had ever heard anyone talk about the hairy man. Grandpa Parker told him that he had not. He was scared now. My great-grandfather said that the hairy man was a tall, hairy human-like creature that would migrate to different locations along the mountains following food sources. When they were in the woods, he had noticed that there were no birds or other natural sounds as they approached the ridge. He said that he noticed something large in the hollow, much larger than a black bear and walking like a man. He whistled hoping it would move on, but he didn't notice it move or make any sound. From his experience, that was an indication that it was time to leave because the bear man was staying put. The return whistle they heard was a warning to stay out of the woods. When my great-grandfather was younger, a woman and her young boy went missing in a woodland in nearby Swain County, North Carolina. People had seen a hairy man in the area and suspected that it was responsible for the disappearance. There had been other disappearances previous to that. No remains were ever found. The next day, his father decided to start harvesting corn. This year, a large patch of cornfield nearest to the woods was left unharvested. His mother also left several baskets of potatoes at the wood's edge that winter. They didn't want any problems from the hairy man, especially since he was known to raid chicken houses. One evening, while he and his father were working in the shop, they heard a long whistle coming from the woods. His father smiled and said, "Don't mind that, hairy man is saying thank you." The next spring, they once again went into the woods to hunt. The hairy man had moved on.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.